Good evening, and welcome to Journeys with Judy. Tonight we are in Columbia, Pennsylvania. I almost said Maryland because I'm from Maryland.
I get that a lot.
With Sue Purdy. She is the owner and operator of Reiki with Sue Purdy, as well as Starless Sue's Creations. So we're here to learn everything that Sue is willing to share with us about her and her journey and how she's become who she is today. So thank you for having us in your beautiful healing space.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, we're very happy to be here. This is a beautiful room. It has beautiful energy, and all of her Starless Sue creations are just amazing. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to start nice and easy. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Harrisburg. We lived in Middletown. So I was born in Harrisburg and was raised in Middletown, stayed there till I graduated high school.
Okay. And
Well, actually till I graduated 2 years of college.
2 years ago. And then where did you go from there?
Got married and was out in California. Phil was in the Navy. And so we started out in California, and then we went to Idaho because, you know, they have secret Navy base out there. And they do actually have a Navy facility out there where they train people for nuclear power.
Okay.
But we used to say we used to tease the...
Phil is watching.
Yes, Phil is watching. we used to tease the natives that we had a secret submarine base. But Idaho was very pretty. We were only there during the winter, but it was very pretty. And then we went from there to Newport News, Virginia. And then finally back to Lancaster when he went out to sea for a year cruise.
Okay.
So pretty much stayed in Lancaster ever since then.
Ever since. Okay.
Yeah, we had 6 years in the Navy.
Wow.
That was long enough.
That was good.
That was good. That was good.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a brother and a sister. They're both older than I am. My brother's about 5 years older than I am. My sister is 10 years older than I am.
So you're the baby.
I'm the baby, and boy, what a baby I am. I took advantage of that. I don't think either one of them will be watching the show.
You wrote that one out for
I
all it
wrote
was
that one
worth.
out. Yeah, I did.
So are they in the area?
My sister's in Palmyra, and my brother is down in Florida.
Okay. Do you visit him often?
I have never been down.
Really?
I've never been down.
Okay. All right. So are you close?
Not really. We are close in that we both support each other and love each other, but there's a lot of issues that kind of keep us apart at times.
Okay.
I see my sister pretty often, as long as we're both healthy and can drive and get to go places. So, but I see her quite often, talk to her a lot on the phone.
Excellent.
So,
Are your parents living?
no, they're both gone. Lost Pop in 1996, and my mom died in 98. And my mother-in-law died in 97. So we had a rough 3 years.
Yeah, you did.
It was
Wow.
like boom, 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 and my nephew was killed the year before. So
That's a tough
that all
span.
started. It was a rough span.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm
But-
sorry.
Well, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And they were all different in how the grieving process went. So that is the one thing that's fascinating when you have had a lot of deep losses.
Mm-hmm.
How very different the grieving process is each time.
Yeah. Now, would you say that that's all because it depends on the relationship that you had with the person that...
I think so, and how very connected. Like my mother-in-law's was very difficult, as was my father-in-law's when he passed 7 years ago, because I was very, very, very close to them. You know, parents, a lot of times you keep that parent-child relationship, so you don't really get to the parent-adult relationship. And so we really didn't have that with my parents as much, but with his parents, his mother was like my best friend for the longest time. So I was really blessed to have them.
Yeah, Jen and I both lost our mothers young, and we were just starting to transition to the point where we were giving back to my parents and sending them on trips and doing for them when my mom got sick. So yeah,
Oh,
you
my.
totally miss out on.
You do. You miss out on
lot.
that adult
Adult
relationship. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How would you best describe your childhood?
It was an interesting childhood. There were parts of it that were really sweet, and there were parts of it that were really sour. It's a nice way to put it. My dad was an alcoholic, which is what finally took him. And my mom had issues. She was never diagnosed with anything, but she really came off to me like she was manic depressive, and then so she self-medicated with alcohol. I'm not sure calling her an alcoholic quite fits because she never quite was in that realm. She would go through periods of it, but
Okay.
that was mostly when she was depressive.
Okay.
So I think she was self-medicating. Well, Dad was too, for that matter.
Right.
But
Right.
so
Hers
they had
were in and
so they
out.
had their issues. But she was one of those personalities where she could flip on a switch.
Ooh.
So
Things were
you
very
know,
unpredictable
Jekyll
then.
and Hyde at times. She was a lovely woman. She'd give you the shirt off her back if you needed it.
Mm-hmm.
But then she would flip that switch, and you know, I always call myself in that mode, Ugly Susie.
Oh.
You don't want to meet Ugly Susie at 4:30 in the morning. That's not a nice time to be talking to me. So don't ever schedule a Reiki session at 4:30 in the morning.
Okay.
But I mean, you know how you have those different parts of your personality, and so when that part of her would come out, and it would come out abruptly, it was difficult to deal with as a child.
And as a child, I'm sure you tried to figure out what it was that triggered it, but you never could.
There was never, you never knew.
There was never
You never
anything
knew.
consistent.
I mean, but I remember times when they would argue, and Mom was the one that would hit at times, and she would go after Pop, and I'd hide behind the couch with the dog
Oh, wow.
because I was little enough to be able to do that.
Right.
And I can remember, and I think one of the memories that I don't know why it was, but there was always the butter dish always flew and hit the wall. So you'd have a big blotch of butter, and then the ashtray went right behind it.
Oh.
And so then you'd get this
Interesting.
buttery ash mix all over the wall, and yeah, that was one of those childhood memories that kind of stuck with you because it happened more than
Yeah.
once, you
That's
know.
interesting.
And it just I always said, why do you guys always have to do the butter with the ashes, you know? I only asked that once. I never asked it
I was
again.
gonna say I don't think you'd ask
No,
that
I
again.
did ask it once because you know that's how I am. But
Right.
yeah, I never understood the butter and the ashes thing.
Hmm.
But it's a neat metaphor if you think about it.
It is.
So
Interesting. Okay, so in all that,
Mhm.
do you have a fondest childhood memory?
I have some. I think one of the ones that comes to mind is there was an eclipse when I was like about 6 years old, and of course you couldn't go out in the eclipse because they didn't want you looking up in the sky. And my dad did make a little light box for us to look in out of the shoebox, but he and his buddy stayed in and watched a ball game, and he got out all these we had 2 card tables, and he set them up and had chairs, and he gave me a mess of blankets and let me make a fort. And then he put a little stool inside the fort, and he gave me drinks and cookies and crackers and things to have in my fort.
Oh, that's cool.
While that was his way of making sure I didn't go outside to play,
Right.
because I usually went out. I was always outside,
Mm-hmm.
but he made the fort a really neat place for me to be and to be safe. And then when I got older and realized why he had done that, I thought that was a pretty creative way to
It was.
handle that.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Instead of yelling at you, just sit down and
Yeah.
shut up.
Yeah, no, yeah,
That was great.
and he didn't. And so I played in my fort for as long as I could get away with it
That's great.
until Mom got home from work. But it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I always remember that because the one quilt was real pretty in patchwork, and the light was coming through, and then the light went out, which scared me because it did go almost total,
Mm-hmm.
and it scared me. And so then Pop took a flashlight and was kind of shining it through. It was kind of fun. He can make things fun.
So you said you were outside all the time. You've
Oh, yeah.
always connected with nature?
Yeah, I would go. I was one of those kids, and that was back when you could do it. I mean, I'm 63 almost, and you could go outside at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you didn't come
Come in
back
the
until
dark.
the street lights came on.
Yep, exactly.
As long as you were home before the street lights came on, you were good.
Right.
And I would go everywhere. I mean, we'd get on our bikes as preteens and teens and just ride for miles and miles. I would go from Middletown to E-Town without even thinking about it.
Right. It wasn't a big
So
deal.
it wasn't
then.
a big deal then.
No.
We'd go to High Spire, go down along the river and walk. I mean, we did things that nowadays parents would absolutely faint over.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
survived.
Things were different then.
But things were different.
Things were different. Yeah.
So I feel bad for our kids that they can't explore like that because we did go places that no kids had any right going.
And her parents, well, at least, I don't know if they never knew or they pretended like they didn't know, but. you know,
Mine usually ended up
I
finding
was
out.
going to say, mine usually knew. It was whether or not they were going to tell you right away or it was going to come at you a little later.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. So what was challenging for you as a child?
Just knowing where I belonged, knowing when to shut up, because I'm a chatterbox by nature. And when you have parents that are compromised at times, you have to know when to not be
Right.
out there. So that was something I never did really learn it well.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that was challenging. It was also challenging because when they split up when I was 6, Mom really didn't get into school much at all. In fact, I signed all my own report cards.
Oh, wow.
So, because she just didn't do anything, there was no going to anything, and so I didn't have that kind of support that other kids had.
And your brother was 5 years older than you, and
Yes.
your sister was 10.
Yeah,
so...
no, she stayed with Pop.
Oh, okay.
So, because she was 16 at the time, she wasn't going to go with Mom. They didn't get along real well, and so then my brother and I stayed together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he went in the Air Force, which left me by myself, and I'm like, whoa, this isn't fair.
So you went from being the baby to the only child.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So it was. We all had different relationships with our parents because of the age spread and because we ended up splitting into 2 families, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us very different perspectives. There's things I know about Pop that they don't know, and about Mom that they don't know, and vice versa. So, and we have very different memories.
And you being the youngest and being so young when they did split, you spent more time with the parents, with your mom and dad, than your siblings because
Yeah.
of their ages.
Right. I spent a lot of time with Mom, and then Pop moved out to Oklahoma with his job for a
Oh.
while.
Okay.
And I was in middle school, and it was easier to tell people he died, and then I had to resurrect him in 9th grade when he came back.
It was like a soap opera.
It was like a soap opera. Oh, this is
Oh,
my
wait,
dad.
he's alive!
He's alive! It was all a dream! But it was funny, because I used to tell people he died, it was easier. Because
Right.
back there again, back
Right, there
then,
weren't as many
divorce and
families.
separations were not socially acceptable. In
Right.
fact, I had a couple of friends whose parents wouldn't allow me to their house because of it.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that's
Oh,
how it
wow.
was, and so it was just easier to say he was dead until he came back. And then I moved in with him
Until he came back.
when I graduated in high school. My mom moved to Virginia to be with her mom, and I stayed with Pop while I went to Hack for 2 years.
Huh.
So then I got to know Dad on a whole different level,
Whole different level.
that the other 2 never had.
Wow.
Which was really interesting.
Huh.
And he dried out for most of that time.
Really?
Yeah,
So
because
you really got to know a different man.
Yep.
What a
because I
blessing
told him I
that
was gonna move out if he, because he was giving me the 4:00 confessions every morning, and I said I can't go to school and work full time and have 4:00 confessions. I need my sleep. Well, he didn't want me to leave, so he quit drinking. He was a
Wow.
binge drinker, and he could set a date and say I'm going to drink on that date, and that's what he would do. It might be 6 months, it might be 2 years, but he could do that.
Oh, wow.
He's an amazing person. Very, very bright. Very bright.
Wow. What a gift that was.
Yeah.
That you had those years with him.
It was. It was great to get to know him that way.
So, what was challenging for you as a teenager? You know, the whole
Well-
divorce thing? And
Well, when I was 13, I had an experience that was kind of a big part of my spiritual journey. I was born and raised an Episcopalian, so
Mhm.
I was baptized as a infant,
Mhm.
and so we went a little bit, but not too much. But I always knew I was an Episcopalian, and when I was 13, I was very depressed. Didn't want to live the life we were living. There was a lot of things going on that weren't pleasant, and I was by myself. My brother was gone in the service. And one day I was at the sink, and Mom had done something with the big meat cleaver thingy, the long chef's knife, I guess it is.
Mhm.
And I kind of went into that samurai mode where I had it up over my head and was bringing it down.
Ooh.
And I was serious. I mean, as serious as a 13-year-old can be.
Right.
And I was a wiry little thing. If I weighed 70 pounds wet, it would have been heavy.
Right.
And it actually stopped at my breastbone. I probably didn't have the strength to push it in, but I very distinctly heard a voice, "Stop. Your work isn't done. I have more for you to do." Now, that voice was so loud that I turned around because I knew there wasn't anybody in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally shook. And I ended up kind of going over to the corner and kind of, totally terrified because I wasn't sure who or what I had heard. I still think it was either my guardian angel, because I always had angels around me and I always knew they were around me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was either my guardian angel or it was Jesus. And a lot of times I still think it was Jesus that did it.
Mhm.
And so that kind of spurred me on to go. I started walking to church, which was from my house all the way down to where the International Airport is now. That used to be the Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little chapel that our church rented for $1 a year.
Oh.
And so I walked down there, and the first Sunday I walked down there, I just watched everybody go in and out, and then I walked home. And I did that 2 Sundays in a row, and then on Palm Sunday, I really dressed up as best I could with my holy red sneakers, which was appropriate because they were holy. And I remember the priest waving me over because he had seen me the other 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I stayed connected with the church. So it was a challenge, but it was also really the start of me recognizing there was something big outside of me
Okay.
that I could tap into and that was watching over me. So that no matter how bad it got, somebody was.
You were never alone.
Yeah, I was never alone after that. I was never alone before it,
Mhm.
but that voice let me know. And as I said, I've tended over the years to think that was Jesus. Like I said, it could. I don't know. I haven't asked.
Right.
It didn't matter. I got the message.
Yeah. Clearly, you received the message.
So that's where I went from there.
Wow.
And that started my whole process of being in the church, of being active in the church.
Okay. And that was at 13.
That was at 13.
Okay. So, how about through high school? Still active in the church?
Yes.
Was
very
it ever a bone of contention with your mom? Or was she supportive of you being in the church?
It didn't
Didn't
matter.
matter.
As long as I wasn't in her hair, she was fine.
Okay. So Sunday you were taken care of.
Yeah. Sunday, well, I took care of myself anyway. No, I was in youth group. I did all of that stuff. In fact, Phil and I met at a diocesan youth conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How old were you when you met?
So, well, I had just graduated, so I was 17. That would have made him 19.
Okay.
And I dated a friend of his first, and then he and I broke up, and then about a year later, Phil and I got together. And we did most of our courting through the mail because he started out, he went to the Navy right away.
Okay.
So we did a lot of our courting. We didn't have very many dates. You know what I mean? Like, once we started getting serious, there really wasn't a lot of dates.
Well, you spent all that time.
But we did a lot of
Writing
writing.
letters. Exactly.
We got to know each other
Really
better
well.
than a lot of
I
people.
was
Yeah.
going to say, which is a really good thing.
And he's a cradle-born Episcopalian.
Okay.
So that was something we had in common.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So
Okay, so you're 17. You've graduated high school. What are you doing now? You're going to move in with your dad and go to 2 years of hack.
mm-hmm.
For what?
Biology and chemistry.
Oh, okay.
I was, I loved to learn. I was very into the sciences.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some interesting challenges because I'm mildly dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 6th grade teacher who I went from getting decent grades in math to failing. And he recognized that I was flipping numbers around. So he spent every school night
Mm-hmm.
after class for about a half hour. And we went from failing that red 62 in his book
Mm-hmm.
to a 94. So I still use those tools. And as I progressed through life and got jobs, I didn't really get trained in bookkeeping at all, but I've always ended up in bookkeeping and accounting.
That's
or
pretty
numbers.
funny.
It's pretty funny.
That's pretty funny.
But I can catch errors because of it's a mild dyslexia, so it's not a debilitating one,
Mhm.
but it can cause problems. Like I transposed the number for you guys coming over today. I noticed that in email.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually pretty careful to catch those. But every once in a while I mess up. Not a lot.
It's really good that your teacher picked that up.
He did. He was awesome. He's also the one who made sure I got glasses. I needed glasses and Mom wasn't taking me.
Mm-hmm.
And he told her, he said, if she doesn't have glasses when she comes back next year, we are going to take action.
Wow.
And then I remember the first day I could talk about an experience. The first day I put those glasses on, there were leaves on the trees. There were birds up there flying around. There was salt on the floor. I mean, I just was amazed. And I kept reading the signs as we were driving home from the eye doctor. I just kept reading the signs like, this is wild. I didn't know all this stuff was here. So that's
You didn't know any
That's
better.
how bad my eyes were.
It was, my daughter came home, it was 4th grade, with the second spelling list, and we're going through her spelling words, and I was like, that's not a word. I copied it right off the board. I said, honey, that's not a word. Took her and got her glass. It was the same thing. She was like,
Wow. I must have walked around and said wow about 40 days before I got over it. It was such a revelation that there was a world out there. And the birds in the trees, I could see bird nests.
yes.
things.
Leaves had detail and color.
Yes.
Yes.
Salt on the floor. Oh, now I see dirt. I have to clean it up.
I'm supposed to be able to just see what that sign says. Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, and then the first time being in class and being able to see the blackboard really was a revelation.
Yeah.
That was like,
She was pretty excited about that
yeah,
too.
yeah. Because I always liked learning in school. School was my safe haven.
Yeah.
I was a school nerd. I was also not very popular, so the teachers liked me a lot
Well.
because I was kind of a brown noser. But you know, I had to ingratiate myself with some adults.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Well, kudos to that teacher.
Oh, he was amazing.
Yeah,
He was amazing. I wrote him several thank you notes over the years. I would touch base with him.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so as you're going through your schooling, your 2-year schooling at Hack, what did you find challenging then?
Just getting through the days because I was working at a department store and paying my way through, and it just was a lot of work. I don't remember doing a lot of fun stuff. It was just push, push, push.
And that's when you were corresponding with Phil?
Mm-hmm.
So that was, you had a boyfriend, but you didn't have a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually how we got engaged. Because there was this one fellow that kept bothering me, and I said, look, I have a boyfriend, and he's in the Navy, and he best not see you talking to me like this, because you'll regret it. So then it went on from there. He still wouldn't leave me alone, and finally said, look, I'm engaged, okay, so you need to back off. And then Phil said, well, let's make it official when I come home at Thanksgiving, so we did.
There you go.
So that's basically how we decided we were getting married.
I love it.
And so his brother announced the same Thanksgiving that we did. So the parents had their whole full table of people,
That's really cool.
So they got married a little bit before we did.
Yeah.
I think.
Are they
No, after us.
Are they still married?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Everybody told us we wouldn't last 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
We're coming up on 44 this year.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's great.
It's a little bit of a feat. Takes work.
It does. Always.
It takes a lot of work. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you find challenging now?
now,
Mm-hmm.
oh dear. What do I find challenging? Several things. We had a really tough year financially last year, which I found very, very challenging, and finally decided, okay, I got to get an outside job outside of my Reiki, because Phil really wasn't in a place to do that. He's retired early, and I have marketable skills that were easy. He used to be working for the power plant, so he basically ran the plant and ran the river, as it were, to make electricity.
Okay.
And so his marketable skills, to put that in a resume, is a little difficult.
Right.
But I had all these skills from my jobs as, office manager and accountant and bookkeeper and all of these things. So I basically put on Facebook, I said, hey guys, anybody need a Girl Friday? And here's what I can do. And one of my internet friends, I've never met her in person. Thank you, Stephanie. She said, have you ever thought about working for this financial group? And I said, no. And then she explained what her job was, and that they have what they call as an on-call. So this person goes in and takes the administrator's place when they're out sick or on vacation. And usually this person is a fill-in for the region. So you can pick however many office branches you want to work at.
Oh, wow.
And have your name out there and work for multiple branches. So you basically can pick your own hours. Well, hey, as a Reiki practitioner,
That's perfect.
that's perfect. I only have to work 100 hours a year to stay active.
Mm-hmm.
So that means if I only want to work 2 days a week there, and there are 2 days a week offered to me, I can take them and still have the other days to do my Reiki.
Right.
Now, recently I was working more than that because one of our administrators for one branch was out on leave. And so I was working 3 and 4 days sometimes.
Okay.
But that was a bit challenging because it's a financial group, and there's a lot of training involved, a lot of details involved, and when you're 62 and you're learning a whole new nomenclature and a whole new business, even though it was very, very similar to what I was doing before, it's different. And so I found it not only challenging but exciting because I do like working with the public. So I kind of miss that office side, So
has this been a good balance for you then?
yeah, I think this is going to be a good balance. I think I'll be an asset to them, and it's certainly going to be an asset to my pocketbook.
So, very good. Well, that kind of leads into what jobs have you had? It's funny that you work with numbers, but when you were younger, you said you were working your way through your 2-year schooling. What did you do then?
Well, even before that, I worked at the bowling alley.
Okay.
I worked at the bowling alley from when I was about 12 or 13, which back then there weren't a lot of child labor laws that really, nobody really followed up. But I did stuff there. I would be a grease monkey down back and oil the machines and grease the machines. And sometimes I worked the front desk and check people in and out. You know, sometimes I'd keep score. That was back
With
when you
numbers?
used to have the little numbers
Exactly.
with the little paper up
More
there.
numbers.
Yep. So I would do that. I learned how to repair pool cues, pool sticks when they would be broken. I would fix those. So I did all of that, and then I worked at a department. So I worked at 2 department stores actually before I left for the Navy to be a Navy wife. And then I came back and I worked I worked at Friendly's for quite a while. My mom was a professional waitress, and I say that because she was really good at what she did. And so that was kind of in my blood, so I did that for a while. And then I worked for the church side to that, doing, keeping the receipts. And then somebody there said, hey, you know, this organization needs a bookkeeper. How about we train you and you be a bookkeeper? And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know what I was getting into. So, but that basically started a career of bumping up and up and up and up, you know. And my last job was actually just doing accounting. That's all it was. So the one before that, and that one was only 6 months. The one before that, I was office manager, assistant, IT person, you name it, I did it. And I was the accountant. So it was a pretty hefty job. And then I was like, I'm done now.
It's over.
Phil says you're a better mechanic than him.
That is true. That is true. I'm a better mechanic. His father was very, very good with tools. Phil did not get that. However, he did get his mother's beautiful singing voice. So he traded one talent for another talent.
That's fair.
And then he passed that talent down to our younger son. So, who's an Episcopal priest, and he can cantor like nobody's business.
Wow.
So, and now my granddaughters both have singing voices. So, I don't mind that he's not mechanical. He passed down some other good genes.
It's all right.
We'll let him off the hook tonight.
So how many kids do you have?
2.
Okay.
2. I have Tom is a priest, married to Donna down in Georgia with my 2 granddaughters. And Jessie is living at home with us right now. She's currently between jobs. She is living in my dining room, which we have a very tiny house. It's about 900 square feet, and when you put 3 adults in, it gets
fills up quickly.
And 3 dogs. It gets a little tight.
Okay, so that's a little challenging right now.
That's a little challenging right now for everybody.
Gotcha.
So I know she's ready to have her own space and find a job. Jobs finding isn't easy these days.
No, it's
really not. And so it's just one of those things. But yeah, that's a little challenging.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because you know, she lived on her own for quite a long time,
Right.
and then we had our routines.
Yeah.
So
Bringing those 2 worlds together. Adjustments.
yeah,
Now, you said you went to school for biology and what else?
chemistry.
You never did anything in those fields?
Nope.
What was your intention behind going to school for biology and chemistry?
Originally, I wanted to go into research, but it just never finished growing. I don't think I was ever meant to do those things.
Right.
I think everything kept shifting me other directions. And I can be my brain, whenever I've taken those tests that say, are you right brain or left brain, I'm kind of right in the middle. Okay. So, but in business, it was always my left brain. And I'm very disorganized at home and a clutter bug, but at work, everything is lined up, and I work by the book, which would irritate some bosses because I would do it by the book.
Right.
Other bosses, like my new one, they like when you do everything by the book.
The book is here for a reason.
The book is here for a reason.
It's here for a reason.
So but I mean that's how I've always been, and then there's always been this other side of me, the one that writes poetry and does things. So.
All right. So you talked about when you were 13. That's when your spiritual journey began, and you dove into the church. Okay.
Lots of committees, both locally and diocesan level. Okay. A lot of committee work, but they almost all of them ended up being administrative.
So how did you get to Reiki?
Well, one of the things, I used to get visions all the time, and they mostly were negative ones, and they were overpowering me. And so I went to my priest and I said, hey, look, I'm seeing things, and I know I'm not nuts because, I've been tested. But I said, I got to figure out what to do with these things. So like 9/11 is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the Shanksville plane go down for 4 years,
Oh, wow.
like a little newsreel before it happened. And the morning it happened, my priest sent me to a Presbyterian minister who didn't work with people that had visions, but he said he'd try to help me out, which he did actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called him the next day and I said, "Did you see that Shanksville?" And he goes, "I thought of you immediately."
Wow.
And I said that because I kept saying to him over the years as that would come up again, and I'd say, "I had that dream again," and he'd say, "Oh," he says, "Same thing." I said, "Yeah, I don't understand somebody driving a passenger plane straight down where you can see the wings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go up there to Shanksville, there is a brass relief, and literally you can see the wings in the ground. Wow. You know, where the hole went."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I kept seeing over and over and over. So, the Challenger was another one that
Really?
blew up on my 30th birthday. A couple like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the school bus that got hit in Chicago where there was a double train and the bus driver thought it was clear and went across, another train got him. And when you see those things over and over, it's very difficult, and I didn't want them.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't want them because I didn't understand what I had. I
Mm.
knew I've always had visions, I've always had things that would happen,
Right.
but I just didn't want to.
See, I would wonder, what am I supposed
Acknowledge
to
them.
do with that?
Well, initially I was like, I don't want to acknowledge
Yeah.
that.
Right.
So then he helped me, and we got to the point where, because I was always an intercessor, so I always prayed for people.
Mm-hmm.
People that didn't even know I was a Christian would come up to me and say, "Tell me their life story," a good empath, right?
Yep.
"Tell me their life story," and ask me to pray for them. Now,
Mhm.
I wasn't wearing any signs that I was religious at all. But
Right.
they would ask me to pray for them. So I knew I had something, and then a couple of times I would be in situations where there was a real dire emergency. My hands would get very hot, and I would see light coming out of them. And then I got really curious, and so as this gentleman that was working with me, he had an ecumenical group, non-denominational, and we were at a retreat, and the facilitator hurt her hand badly.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like way out in the boonies. And so one of the ladies who spent half the year in Swaziland learned hands-on healing from the healers there.
Mm. So
she went, and as is wont to happen in the middle of the night, like the ladies' room got filled up with people about 4:30 in the morning. And this woman was literally putting her hand in cold water in the sink because her hand hurt so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And Emily said, "Ladies, everybody stay when you come out. We're going to make a healing circle." So she then directed us, and that was my first time with an honest-to-goodness healing circle.
Wow.
And she did this healing that was just amazing. This woman's hand was already bruising badly.
Mm-hmm.
When we went down for breakfast the next morning, it was almost its normal color. And there was almost no swelling except right around here in her thumb. She had it x-rayed when the conference was over, and there was nothing broken.
Oh,
And she couldn't move her thumb initially. So that really got me going. And so I asked Emily about it, and she goes, "Well, the closest thing I can tell you to do here would be Reiki."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Because you are dealing with God or spirit or whoever your divine is."
Right.
And she said, "For you, that would be a perfect match."
Absolutely.
Well, back then, I would look Reiki up on the internet, and it wasn't,
Yeah, I was like,
they weren't good articles, and I was like, I don't know. But it kept coming up and coming up and coming up and coming up, and finally, it was like, okay, I get it. And so I started getting some sessions, and I was like, oh, this is like too wild.
And how long ago was this?
That would have been around 2003.
Okay.
And then I decided I wanted to be trained, so I started my training in 2005, 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2006, then I decided I wanted to do a business. And since Phil was working a good job, I could quit my good job.
Right.
And we had to adjust our living style,
Mm-hmm.
but I was able to do what I wanted and started my practice. So that was fun because I really love Reiki. I just love it. So,
I love it too. I believe everybody should be attuned to at least level 1.
At least level 1.
Yeah.
And then I get a little frustrated when they don't go to level 2 because you miss so much when you don't get to
Yes.
level 2.
Yes.
The master level is okay, but it's not for everybody.
No, and it's just,
But that
for me,
one,
that's more about
but,
teaching.
but that 1 and 2
Mhm.
is especially if you have animals. I think level 2, or children, or someone who can't communicate well. I think
Yes.
that level 2, because you have that mental emotional
Mhm.
component to it. I think that's awesome.
I agree.
And and as I tell my ones, you can send Reiki distance because it's your intention.
Mhm.
But at level 2, you have tools to make it where you can feel it on the other end, and vice versa.
Yes.
So do that.
yeah.
Go that far
Come
at
on.
least. Come on, do 1 and 2. So I really, really enjoy it, and I've trained quite a few people.
Yeah.
So
2006, you started your own business.
my own business.
Has it always been here in Columbia?
But no, initially I had a little shop downtown. A hairdresser allowed me to use an off room, but it wasn't. There was too many smells and too much noise.
Mhm.
And then again, I kind of put out there, hey, I need a space, and this friend of a friend said, hey, I know this lady in Columbia, and I'm like, oh, Columbia. That's so far off the beaten path, because you don't think of people coming to Columbia.
Right.
It's actually a sweet little town.
Mhm.
Well, what I found out when I got here was it's perfect because I'm halfway between York and Lancaster.
Mhm.
And I have people that come up from Maryland,
Mhm.
and I have people that come down from Camp Hill and Harrisburg. So
That's perfect.
it's perfect,
Yeah.
actually. And so I started out across the hall, and then when I had my medical crisis a couple of years ago, I gave the room up because I wasn't sure I was going to come back. And then when we got the all clear, I came over to this room across the hall, and I really like this room because it's got the west sun.
Mm.
That room was a little dark. This
Mhm.
room is really bright. Too bright.
Now you say medical event. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I had tongue cancer. And I don't have any risk factors. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and I don't have HPV virus. HPV virus is one of the biggest now causes of oral cancers.
Mhm.
And it's also because of where it manifests. We get a lot of young people that are getting it in their 20s and 30s, and it's killing them because they aren't looking for it.
Mhm.
Mine was misdiagnosed for a year. And I was very fortunate by the time I got there that it ended up the way it did. Initially, he felt that they were going to take half of the left side of my tongue. And because it was against some sensitive structures, he was afraid my tongue would end up dead in the water.
Wow.
My prognosis was probably being on a feeding tube and not being able to talk.
Oh my gosh.
And right before surgery, they told me they were going to break my jaw because I have a very loud mouth, but it's
Mhm.
very tiny physically.
Ah.
And so they were going to break my jaw to go in. And I had, from the time I found out in January, I had 7 weeks. And in that 7 weeks, every day I either had distance healing of some sort or hands-on.
Mhm.
And I used every modality I could get my hands on. And Charlie Gedkin put me on to Sean Castle, who does mystery school things. And she came once a week and gave me hermetic rebalancing,
Mhm.
which, don't ask me to explain it, but it's a really interesting process. And the last week, the 7th week, I was in the other room over here on a chair, and I fell to the side. She thought I was falling asleep. And I grabbed my mouth, and tears were just rolling because of the pain.
Mhm.
I said, she worked with the angels. I said, they moved my tumor.
Oh wow.
And she said, what? And I said, I felt the tumor move. So that was the week before surgery. And I had already had all the pre-surgical photographs and all that. And that's what the surgical team was working on. And it was supposed to be, the surgeon was supposed to have 6.5 hours. The cancer surgeon was
Mhm.
supposed to have 6.5 hours. And then the other surgeon was going to do another 6 hours of reconstruction. And they were going to take skin from a muscle from here.
Mhm.
So when I woke up, all of this was drawn on,
But nothing was gone.
but nothing was gone, which would have affected my fine motor skills.
Oh wow.
And so he's kind of scared the family because he came out at about 4.25 hours.
I'm sure that
And
was terrifying.
That startled him because everything's fine. He said, not sure what's going on, but he said the tumor's the same size and shape, but it's not in the same location as what the pictures showed it. So when I was able to talk again, which I actually got that back even quicker than they thought under the circumstances with as much of the tongue as they took, he said to me, he goes, well, I don't discount anything. He said, am I going to put it in the paper? No. But he said, he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, we both know who the real healer is. I'm just hands.
Nice.
I have an awesome doctor.
Wow.
I really have an awesome doctor. So in April when I go in, if we're clear, that'll be the 5-year mark, and he's considered it cured because he was able to get it all.
Right.
I had the most aggressive form,
Oh wow.
so I was very, very, very fortunate because the kind I had kills people.
Oh my gosh.
So I was very lucky, and I didn't need chemo and I didn't need radiation because he was able, those two structures that he was worried about, because it had moved,
Right.
he could get them. So I'm always with cancer, I'm always, why does this happen to people? Why do people get cancer? In my case, it's so, all right, so why did mine switch? Why did I get a break?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I got a big break. I think I got a big miracle.
Yeah.
And I know there were a lot of people praying, and I know we did a lot of intentional work on that. And I
Right.
believe all of that was pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe that I have a responsibility. That, like that call at 13 when your work's not done yet,
Yes.
I think
It still
I think
wasn't
I got
done.
a clear message on my work's still not done.
Right.
So
Wow.
I mean they did take all 3 layers of lymph nodes here.
Mhm.
They took a submandibular, so I struggle with dry mouth issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this funky looking scar here where they took the graft to put on my tongue.
Okay.
But I didn't lose my hand.
No.
I didn't have to get chemo and radiation. Now, just because I hit the 5-year mark doesn't mean I'm totally clear, but chances are pretty good. And we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Wow,
So
that's
I'm
fantastic.
really blessed.
Yeah.
I'm every day I know it. Even on the bad days when I'm not feeling well, I'm going,
Mhm.
hey, it could be a whole lot worse. You could be dead by now. He gave you 2 years. I mean, he literally told me to get my affairs in order. Because he said, if you go into chemotherapy, you're not going to be in any shape mentally to do all of that stuff. He
Right.
said, so make sure all your paperwork's in order, make sure everything's the way you want it. That way, if you have to go through treatment or the worst happens, you're set.
Everything's on.
Before I went in for surgery, I wrote letters to everybody that was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I planned my funeral, and I wrote my obituary.
Wow.
And I handed it to my best friend, and I said, I hope you never need to open this envelope, but if something worse should happen, please give these out.
There it is.
So I was able to have a little burning party on those.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, your burning party, was it just you?
Yeah, I didn't let anybody read them.
Yeah.
They were mine.
Wow.
I think I still have the obituary, though. I thought it was pretty good.
I did a good job with that.
I did a good job with
Yeah.
that.
We're going to add some stuff to it, but we can use it when it's time.
Yeah. But I think when those of us that are healers, and I'm sure you're probably in the same boat, we've often had a lot of injuries or illnesses. Many of us, not all of us, but a lot of us have had a lot, and I've had a lot of different surgeries, and a lot of things go on that are weird. My doctor calls me the Wonder Woman because, she wonders what's coming next. But, when you're a healer and you have all those experiences and you begin to feel something in someone's body,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of pick up on how the level of pain is, how, and obviously we can't diagnose.
Mm-mm.
But there are times when you feel something where you kind of encourage the person, hey, you might want to get this checked out.
Right.
I'm taking the Reiki. I'm taking the Reiki hat off, but I've had something similar,
Mhm.
and I'm recognizing your symptoms, and you just might want to get it checked out.
Right.
So
That's a story.
that is a story.
That is quite a story.
That is a story.
And the only side effect you have is a little bit of dry mouth?
I have dry mouth. I get neck spasms
Okay.
in here,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes my vocal cord will dry up on me, and I get raspy.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that painful or is it just raspy?
No, but I feel my tongue 24/7. I never not feel my tongue where my scar is.
Okay.
And when it's going to snow or rain, it feels like it's blowing up to like 4 times its size. Physically, it's doing nothing. But the scar feels that way,
Huh.
and then I might start to slur a little bit
Okay.
because it feels thick and it doesn't want to form the sound. And there are still certain sounds that I have to stop and think about to get them out
Yeah.
because you're missing.
What about your taste buds?
Taste buds pretty much came back. It took
Really?
about 2.5 years to get them all back. Again, I was very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I do have trouble with spicy foods now, though. That can be painful, actually.
Okay.
Too much salt can be painful.
Hmm.
But I know people that have had the same surgery I had, and it really does kill their taste buds.
Uh-huh.
So I'm, again, fortunate. I
fortunate
can,
all around.
yeah. So
Wow.
it's been a fascinating journey on that. It really has.
Now, your recovery from that, did you find yourself spending time going, okay, I'm here.
What
else?
now?
Exactly. What more do you want me to do?
Well, what was interesting was I started the year before I got diagnosed. I've been with the Angels for ages,
Mm-hmm.
and they told me I was to make these little prayer bead things, and they weren't even bracelets. They were just little stringy things, and they had me write down how people should use them.
Mhm.
And I just started selling them for a couple bucks. Okay. I never beaded a thing. So this would have been 2013, right?
You never beaded a thing.
Never beaded a thing. Never thought that was a talent.
No way.
No way. So when I was recovering, I had 8 months. I am not a sitter. I can't just
No,
sit.
I couldn't imagine you just sitting.
I can't sit. And crocheting was, I do like to do it, but after a while, it gets to my wrist because it's extremely repetitive.
Right.
Not that making the trees aren't repetitive, but it's different. It's a different movement.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden, I got this bug. Well, why don't you make this? And I really wanted to make tree of life pendants. So I played around with it, and I started making tree of life pendants.
And they're beautiful.
Then I started to make trees, and then I started to make jewelry. And I haven't always worn a lot of jewelry. People that know me for a long time know I really didn't wear a lot of jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, boy, every day something new. You know, when you design, you have to wear your own designs, right? So it was like, that's how I got started. And of course, by then I was already into crystals, had been for a long time. In fact, Phil's very first gift to me, he sent home a rock of geode.
Oh, yeah?
A smoky quartz with a piece of quartz in it. It was gorgeous, but it's about this big. And it came in the mail at Pop's. And he goes, Pop says, I got to know what's in this. It's really heavy. And I opened it up and he goes, what the hell did he send you a rock for? I'm telling you, the man had my number early on.
Yeah, he did.
And it was like, and Smokey's one of my favorite stones.
That's why Smokey was on the floor
earlier. So, you know, it shows you, I hadn't really started a rock collection, but what I did have a rock collection. Everywhere I would go, I would pick a stone up as a memory.
Okay.
And that was my rock collection until I found the sparklies. Well, now I
The
have sparklies
yeah, you
everywhere.
do.
Sparklies everywhere.
They are everywhere.
Oh, you haven't seen the house. I've got sparklies everywhere. So, you know, but I think it was interesting that his first gift to me was a geode.
That's very interesting.
It was very interesting because he really didn't have a clue at that point, I don't think. So that was cool.
He knew something.
He knew something. So anyway, that's how the whole jewelry thing started. While I was recovering, I spent the time learning techniques, and then I was giving them away at Christmas time. Everybody says, you should sell them. I'm like, oh, I don't know. They're not that good. You should sell them.
They're not that good.
So I was like, okay. So then I had to come up with a catchy little name. So my middle name is Star. So I took the Starless Sue. I mixed my two names up, yeah. So I mixed the two names up into Starless Sue, and that's how I got Starless Sue's Creations.
Okay.
But I didn't want to open a whole new business, so it's technically Starless Sue's Creations from Reiki with Sue Purdy.
Yeah.
So it's like
I was wondering why that
it's
was
like
all together.
Yeah,
Okay.
that way it's all covered under my license. And,
Gotcha.
yeah.
So your middle are you a Sue? A Susan?
I'm a Susan. Interesting story. Everybody in my family calls me Susan, except my dad called me Sue. And after he died, he had a little tiny black book. I won't tell you what was in it, but one of the things was my birthday. And it had January 28th, Sue is born. And he always called me Sue. And until I read that book, it didn't really click that he's the one that always called me Sue. Everybody else in the family, extended and otherwise, it was Susan. And I don't like to be called Susan.
Oh, really?
I'd never like to be called Susan.
Oh.
But Pop called me Sue, and that's what I identify myself in school with Sue.
Okay.
And Sue or Susie. I like either one. But I never liked Susan, and when I found that book, I went, Pop must have done that to me, because, you know, very first day I was born, Sue was born.
Sue was born.
So I have my grandmother's middle name and my great-grandmother's first name.
Okay. That's cool.
My grandmother was Steenie Star Stone.
Say that again?
Steenie Star
Stone. Wow. That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful.
So
You're destined for greatness with a middle name of Star.
Star, yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Do you know any other modalities?
The only other one I know, I do Karuna Reiki and Yusui Reiki. And then the only other one I know is Angelic Light Weaving, which you taught me.
Ooh.
And that one was interesting because, were you on that trip last spring to Sedona? Yeah. And Lloyd was taking pictures of you guys going into the labyrinth, and two of you were giving light weaving. Well, about 4 or 5 months before I saw that, during my Reiki sessions, my hands would start free moving. And I'm like, okay, now, I knew it was the angels helping me out, but I was like, okay, I don't know what this is.
I'm just gonna go with it.
So, and then I saw that, and so I texted Lloyd and I said, hey, what is that? And so he told me, and I said, do you teach? And he said, yes. And I said, I want in your next class, which
Okay.
happened to be in June.
Yep.
So, because, I mean, that was like a big message, I'm doing it on my own beforehand.
Yeah.
And so I really, so now when I'm in sessions, I'll say to people, hey, I know Angelic like weaving. If I start to weave, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever said no. But you don't want to freak people out either. If they're used to a regular Reiki practitioner and all of a sudden I'm going like this,
Right. They're like, whoa.
what is
Whoa,
she
hold the
doing?
phone.
Yeah.
That's
So.
that's why the Reiki with Ricky event, because I never identify strictly as a Reiki practitioner.
Right.
I'm an energy practitioner.
Right.
When I get you on the table, whatever I'm guided to do, I do.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I make sure everybody understands that before, so that they're good with it. And
Well, I usually identify mostly as a Reiki practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
I do use the biomat and I do use crystals
Mm-hmm.
as I'm led to use them. But again, I always ask permission
Right.
because it's not
Traditional.
strictly Reiki.
Right.
So I always ask permission if I'm going to use them.
Excellent.
That way, nobody gets snuck
There's
up
no
upon.
surprises.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
if I was an energy worker, then it wouldn't matter if I identified that way.
Right.
Which I probably could at this point.
Yeah.
But most of the people that come to me know I do different things, and most of them are fine with that.
Right. You teach,
I do
Of course.
teach. I do teach.
and you teach Reiki level 1, 2, and 3.
Yes. Yes.
And
I have 14 masters now under me.
14. Fantastic. And you have been teaching for how long?
Started in 2007.
Okay. Wow, that's
So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
I love teaching.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. It's so fun to sit and watch the light bulbs go on.
And what's interesting too, I don't know if you find this, but it seems like Spirit pulls together people in a class that need to be together.
Mhm.
I've had classes form and some people fall off, and then you get to class and find out, oh, they're all animal workers, or these are all hospice workers, or
Right.
these are all counselors and clergy.
There's something common.
And
that
there's a
brings them
common
together.
thread, and then you can kind of tailor the class to them that way,
Yes, exactly.
which is interesting.
It is very interesting. I know in the beginning I was very nervous about getting everything just right. Just like, practicing. I was very nervous about getting everything just
Right.
right. And then when you just loosen up,
And
the
let it
divine
flow.
guidance comes through and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll end up one-on-one. I try not to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to the advantage of the students to have another student to work with.
I agree.
But I think at times there are people who do better on one-on-one.
One-on-one.
So
Mhm.
if it happens,
It's meant to.
it'll happen.
Yeah.
I usually let my guides let me know
Mm-hmm.
if I'm supposed to do that. Now, all you Episcopalian friends that are looking in, yeah, I'm a little weird. Some of you already know that, some of you don't.
You're unique.
I'm unique.
So if somebody wanted to contact you for a session or a class, how
Mhm.
would they do that?
Couple of ways. I have a website, purdyreiki.com, which
Mhm.
has a good bit of information about Reiki and my services on it.
Okay, which is funny. I don't know where Jen went, but I'm assuming she's somewhere and she will post these in the comments as well.
Okay, so it's purdyreiki.com, and then I have a Facebook page, also Purdy Reiki. My business now, my actual license and number is Reiki with Sue Purdy, but back when I first started all this, I didn't go that route yet.
Okay.
So Purdy Reiki you'll see on a lot of things. So my Facebook page is Purdy Reiki. I also have a page for Starla Sue's Creations,
Okay.
so they can look there. Right now I've got my contact information kind of tight on Facebook because I had somebody playing with my account. They didn't play with my account, but they kind of harvested offline and were being a pain in the neck. So
Gotcha.
for right now I've pulled that information off. But you can call me at 717-201-3570 or text. A lot of people message me through
I
Facebook.
was going to say messaging through Facebook is
Mhm.
always effective.
And or you can contact me at sue@purdyreiki.com. That's pretty straightforward. So that's a way people get a hold of me too. My hours are flexible. I do have an outside job outside of Reiki, so I balance the two. But if I have a heavy week on the outside job, I might open up to Sunday afternoon to make sure people don't have to wait too long to get in.
Right.
So, but generally, folks, Reiki comes first. So if you schedule ahead, that kind of gets on the schedule first.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. Passion first.
Passion first.
So, but it's nice to have that flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already talked about you started seeing clients in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how long you've owned your business. We talked about how Starla Sue Creations came about.
Mm-hmm.
We just covered contacts. Will you be participating in any upcoming events, expos, festivals?
In the fall, I'll be doing the Spirit of Oneness for sure. I'm already signed up
Great.
for that, and that'll be Starla Sue's Creations. I might have some events here at the office as far as selling. Sometimes my friend Kathleen across the hall, who's a massage therapist, also does body products. So we'll fill the lobby up and have like a little shop here in Columbia all by itself. And we might bring somebody in to maybe read cards, or somebody that sells something else might come in and join us.
Okay.
So if we get those, your best bet's to either go to the website or check it out on Facebook, because I'm pretty good at putting it on both sites if I've got something going on.
Right.
And
you mentioned you may do a Valentine's Day.
I'm looking at doing a Saturday before Valentine's Day show. And that way if folks want to get some stuff, because I'm always making new things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go there on the Starla Sue's Creations and see a lot of the stuff.
Yeah,
and then
check it out. It's beautiful.
And then I have a group that's Starla Sue's Community, and there I actually have them listed with prices and all that good stuff, so people can look, because I do ship. So
yes.
Some of the things can't be shipped. If they're too heavy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not going to, you'd have to really, some of the things I have just aren't shippable.
Gotcha.
But most of the stuff is very shippable, and I've got stuff in Canada. I usually ship within the United States,
Mm-hmm.
but I've had people that have friends that I'll ship them to them, and then they'll get them to their friend in Canada when they see them next.
Oh, wow.
So some of my stuff's up there, but I have them quite
That's
a few
very
states now. It's kind of cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. So-
Fantastic. All right. So, do you have any pearls of wisdom? We have a lot of viewers that are new to us.
Mhm.
Do we have any questions, first of all?
No questions. Phil's last comment says John Edward.
Yes, I understand that. When I was trying to figure out my gifts, I got John Edward was just doing his Crossing Over show,
Mm-hmm.
and I got his book. And the first time I read it, we were laying in bed, and I'm smacking Phil on the shoulder, going, "That's me, that's me, that's me." I finally learned a lot, and that started me down a whole different trail too.
Okay.
So he was my first teacher by book, and then
cool.
I've had others that I've picked up on and dealt with. I don't use those as I don't offer that as a service.
Mm-hmm.
If I get messages during a Reiki session and someone's open to it, I will give it to them as part of the healing. But
Mhm.
if you come to me and say, "Hey, I need to
want a
hear from
reading."
Great Aunt Tilly," it's not going to happen. Unless Great Aunt Tilly's coming to help you heal.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
That's what I always. I got to the point where I had to ask myself, what's the difference between me and a medium, and that's it.
Yeah.
If a loved one is coming through perfect for healing purposes,
Yep.
then they're going to come through.
Right.
You can't come to me and say, "Hey, Uncle John just died. Are you hearing from him?"
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I don't do that.
I'm
And
not a medium.
I did do animal communication for a while.
Mm-hmm.
As a service, but to be honest, no offense if some of you are watching, I get tired of the people. Because a lot of people would call an animal communicator and they want their animals to do a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just insist you have to tell the animal they have to do it this way. And that's not how it works. If you're doing animal communication and you're asking for animal communication, in your own way, you're tacitly saying they're sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're sentient beings, then they have to be able to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got tired of dealing with that. Well, you've got to go. I'm not doing another cat box. She has to get to the one she needs to get to. She can't because you have it upstairs. She's got arthritis. She can't make it up the stairs.
Right. Period.
It's as simple as that. It's not a behavioral issue. The cat can't get there. So Phil said at one point when I kept getting phone calls and it would be an animal communication call, and I go, oh. And he goes, that's a clear sign you should not be doing this.
Phil was right.
And so that became, I think my words of wisdom you were asking for is just because you can do something does not mean you should be doing it.
If you can't do it with a happy heart.
So I can do a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of things I shouldn't be doing because they don't bring joy, they don't bring health, they don't bring balance to me.
Right.
And so I let those things go. So
That's
that would be my pearls. That would be my pearl because that's the one I really live by.
I was going to say, that's a great one.
Yeah.
That really is a great one. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
I love that. Anything else, Jen?
No.
No?
Questions?
Nothing?
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, we want to thank you again for having us here. This has been
Hey.
great.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming to my little space.
Thanks for
And
having us.
anybody who's listening that needs Reiki or would like to experience it first time or 18 millionth time, I'd be more than glad to work with you.
Yeah.
And if you want classes, if you look on my Purdy Reiki page, you will see that I have 4 classes coming up about Reiki 1, 2 Reiki 1 classes, and 2 Reiki 2 classes. Each class is a day long, and it's complete in one day. So you can choose whichever day suits you better.
Perfect.
And master level, if anybody out there wants to do that, call me and talk to me because that's a little bit different.
Right. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Remember, we won't be here next week because that's when Jen's having her surgery, so send her some light and love. And we'll see you on January 30th is when we'll be back. Have a great night, and don't forget you're awesome.